We start this new year with none other than a Vedanta class. The solace of my life. I hope it's the solace of your life as well. Let's start. Om Om Sahanavavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma Vidvishabhai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Okay. Vedanta Treatise, Chapter 7, The Veil of Ignorance. We were discussing how to gain wisdom. We were discussing the challenges that present themselves when trying to gain wisdom. I'll take up any questions before we summarize what was covered and go ahead. Are there any questions? No questions? Okay.
Spirituality. Such a mind is like milk, watering, and live by it.
So we started the section how to gain wisdom. First and foremost, the distinction between knowledge and wisdom. We mentioned it earlier. Knowledge is information gained from external sources. Knowledge is information gained from textbooks, from teachers, from podcasts, and from videos and whatever. It is a part of the entire body of information that you receive through external sources. Wisdom is the capacity to live by that knowledge. Wisdom is the depth you attain when that knowledge seeps into you. See, there are different kinds of soils, right? There's black soil, there's red soil, there's soil there's desert soil, all sorts of things. Different soils have a different capacity to absorb water and nutrients. So if you go to, especially if you go to the central part of the country, the black clay soil, you'll notice how much ever water you put in it, it doesn't get absorbed. It's very difficult. It doesn't get absorbed. Whereas different soils, when you go for the more redder soils, the water absorption, the capacity of that absorption of the soil is much better. So a lot of people are like black soil, no capacity to absorb. As Rabindranath Tagore says, the world is full of sound scholars, but not sound men, because the host of us are great scholars. We become very well versed in any subject, and we gain the ability to talk about it. That makes us a scholar. But how many of us actually have the ability to live by that? That's what makes us sound men. So Rabindranath Tagore says the world is full of sound scholars, but not sound men. And that's precisely because going from knowledge to wisdom, going from knowledge to wisdom requires effort, and there are multiple impediments upon the way. First of all, do you have the interest to gain knowledge itself? Hmm. Gaining knowledge is not very hard, but still, a lot of people don't aren't drawn to it. They're blissfully ignorant. There's bliss in ignorance. Most people have their shutters down. Most people, by shutters down, I mean they're not looking, they're not searching. Most people have the belief that they know. So the first impediment to knowledge is the ego. The problem with most people is the feeling, I know. Hmm? The problem with most people is the feeling that I know. Second of all, the problem with knowledge is that it doesn't give instant gratification, it doesn't give instant results. It takes time and effort. Converting knowledge to wisdom takes time and effort. Gaining knowledge doesn't take that much of time. Hmm? One entire day you watch 10 podcasts. See, now from the new way to be well versed is podcasts. Everyone is listening to podcasts. Hmm? Some people might think, oh wow, what a great new avenue to gain information, gain knowledge, become knowledgeable. Indeed, no doubt, podcasts are a beautiful, great way, very engaging form of discourse. But it's just providing you information. It's another avenue to provide you information, which is good. Problem is, information remains information, superficial, hmm? Superficial on the surface. So that capacity to that capacity to go deep, that capacity to even recognize that one's understanding is very superficial, and that willingness to go to put in time and effort. It's almost a paradox because you have to be durdarshi, you have to be far sighted, you have to have that ability to see far, look ahead, to see the value of knowledge, the value of wisdom. It's not something that serves you immediately, necessarily. It takes time and effort. That's what it's saying. It takes time and effort. It doesn't give instant gratification. So the first problem was the feeling of I know, the feeling that I understand. So your shutters are down. The second is it takes time and effort. The third problem is the mechanical approach. The third problem is the mechanical approach. The inability to analyze and question. It's a it's perhaps the biggest impediment in converting knowledge to wisdom. I keep asking you, ask questions. Are there any questions? Are there any questions? And just because you don't ask doesn't mean you don't have questions. Maybe you're shy to ask. But the problem is if you don't have any questions. I'm not saying, okay, I'm going to pick out people who never ask questions. No, that's not. I know a lot of people may want to ask in private or may want to, be shy to talk in class or whatever. I don't know. It's not about how many questions you ask, verbally, visibly in class, but how many questions do you have in your head? If you don't have questions, then I think it's a problem. The ability to question, reason, analyze. It's called manana. So the first problem was with Shravana, the inability to listen, the unwillingness to listen. The third problem, the problem is we're discussing with is with manana. Very few people see. People think questioning means arguing. Questioning means disbelieving. Questioning means challenging. No. And even the kind of education we have been most see the problem is most with most teachers as well. They don't encourage questioning. No teacher is worth their position if they don't encourage and entertain questions. They don't encourage and entertain questions. Because knowledge turns to wisdom when you arrive at your own solutions, when you fight with the questions that you have, when you dig through them. Otherwise, it's just a mechanical imitation. So going deep requires that ability to question. Now, question doesn't mean to challenge. That's why Lord Buddha says, "Don't believe." So we concluded with that thought. Don't believe in anything you have heard. Don't believe it because it has come down from many generations. Don't believe because it has been spoken many times by many great people. Don't believe because it comes from authority. But after careful observation and analysis, do you have the capacity to observe and analyze? It's called critical thinking. Do you have an ability to read a paragraph and ask five intelligent questions? Do you have the capacity to read a paragraph and ask intelligent questions? Some of you will have kids or grandkids going to the US to study. Before that, they'll be taking the SAT exams. One of the best things about those exams is the test in critical reading and critical thinking. Highly underestimated skill, highly underestimated requirement. See, I don't know if you, sometimes you should sit with your child or grandchild, when they are taking the SAT mock tests and prep tests. And you should sit with them and see the kind of, you'll be squinting your eyes, you'll be wondering, where did this question come? What is they asking? It's written right there. The entire paragraph is right there. It's just that our brain is not wired to read it critically. And when we don't read it critically, we wonder where did that question come from? Or what are they trying to ask? So critical reading, critical thinking, careful observation and analysis. When you perform that analysis and when it agrees with your reason, when it agrees with your judgment, then make it your own. Live by it. So if you just want to, if you do not go through this process of manana, knowledge will remain knowledge. It will remain information. It won't become yours. It won't become wisdom. So he continues. So these are the impediments in gaining wisdom. Huh? Our own nature, our own abilities prevent us from churning, turning knowledge into wisdom. Now he's going to relate the process of gaining wisdom to the process of making yogurt. That's a beautiful example. It's a beautiful parallel. What you have to do, the kind of time and process you have to take up to turn knowledge into wisdom.
So must spiritual knowledge be taken in regulated doses. If not, the knowledge passes through you without producing the desired effect. You could be well versed in spiritual literature and not turn spiritual. All the sacred information that you gather may not bring about a transformation in your personality. Spiritual books read or discourses heard could make you a scholar at best. You may even author spiritual books, give spiritual discourses, and yet remain far from being spiritual. Spiritual growth is measured by the stability of the mind. An unstable mind perturbed in the fluctuations of the external world lacks the elements of spirituality. Such a mind is like milk, watery and easily flowing, whereas a stable mind resembles yogurt, thick and does not run. The process of preparing yogurt out of milk is strikingly similar to making a person spiritual.
See, spiritual growth is measured by the stability of the mind. An unstable mind, perturbed by the fluctuations of the world, lacks the elements of spirituality. See, when you're baking bread, huh, or making a cake, what do? Rashna ji will know. I don't know if she bakes cakes. Huh? 20 minutes into baking the cake, you'll have to test it. You take a fork, you dig it into the cake. Now, if it's still sticky, you'll say it's not ready. Hmm? It's not ready. When you stick the fork in and comes out clean without anything clinging to it, then you know it's cooked from inside. So a measure of spiritual growth is like a baked cake. Uh, if someone is perturbed and disturbed and harassed by the world and its fluctuations, the world is challenging. Whether you've read the Bhagavad Gita, you've not read the Bhagavad Gita. It's not that the world's challenges will suddenly stop. भूत पिशाच निकट नहीं आवे महावीर जब नाम सुनावे doesn't mean that challenges won't come. You'll gain the ability to deal with the challenges. So if challenges are coming and you are buckling to them, we're not criticizing, we're analyzing. If challenges are coming and you're unable to deal with them, you're harassed by them, you're troubled by them, you're disturbed by them, you're completely overwhelmed by them, it means Delhi abhi dur hai. And it's nobody's 100% qualified, so nobody's 0% qualified. The extent to which you are disturbed. Now, what is your line? Swami used to give this example. Does losing a pen trouble you? Does losing a watch trouble you? Does losing your car trouble you? Does losing your house trouble you? Does losing your wealth trouble you? Does losing your family trouble you? At what point do you buckle? Do people and their actions trouble you? Does a passing comment trouble you? If these simple things trouble you, then Delhi abhi dur hai. We're not criticizing, we're analyzing. So spiritual growth is measured by that ability to deal with the tribulations of the world. And everybody has problems. Using you are the only one who has problems. Smell the coffee. Smell the coffee. Everybody has problems. If one by one I speak to each of you will list me 10 problems you have in your life. Life is great, but the buts. See, everyone has a problem. It's not about how problematic someone's life is, it's your ability to deal with it. Your ability to either find a resolution to it, resolve it, or to manage it, or to endure it, depending on the kind of problem and the stage of the problem. Sometimes you just have to endure problems. But your ability to deal with problems is the sign of spirituality. Just like the ability, the cake, not having any gooey stuff inside, is a sign of its readiness. So knowledge must be taken in regulated doses, and it goes back to the example I gave you about soil and water. See, if you pour too much water in soil, what will happen? It won't be able to absorb it, it'll flow. What's a flood? What's a flood? Too much water has come in, unable to absorb all of it. So spiritual knowledge must be gained in regulated doses. It's a world, it's a wealth, it's immeasurable wealth of information. And we are constantly told the idea is not to go broad, it's to go deep. It's not to go broad, it's to go deep. In the Bhagavad Gita, he says multiple times, I've told you everything that's supposed to be known. You don't have to go through thousands and thousands and thousands of verses. You may, you don't have to. The idea is to go deep. 700 verses, it's enough. 700 verses are enough. In thousands of verses you'll read, you'll find resemblance from those 700 verses. You'll find something or the other to relate to. So it's not about going broad, it's about going deep, and it's about going slowly, gradually. The way you have to measure your progress is not through the breadth you have covered, but the depth you have gone. How stable are you as an individual? So he compares this process of converting knowledge to wisdom to making yogurt.
It has been an age-old tradition among the Indians to make yogurt in their homes. To prepare yogurt, milk is first heated to boiling point and left to cool to lukewarm temperature. A small portion of yogurt left over for the purpose is then mixed with the milk. The mixture is left overnight. By next morning, the thin running milk is converted to thick formed yogurt. In a similar process, a seeker initially goes through the challenges of life. Later, he chooses a relatively peaceful place for spiritual practice. Not the heat of the marketplace, nor the cool heights of the mountain. That is indicated by bringing the milk to lukewarm temperature. The little yogurt of yesterday represents a measured daily dose of Vedantic knowledge left behind by the sages. That is added and stirred. The spiritual truths taken in have to be reflected upon. The overnight period that the yogurt takes to set indicates that the seeker needs a length of time for the knowledge to seep in. Adopting this procedure, the individual emerges with a sound, stable mind. The stability of mind marks his spiritual evolution.
So, what do you have to do with yogurt? To prepare yogurt, you first have to. You may say, what do you know about it? Well, I've prepared a lot of yogurt in my life, especially living in America. We used to get wonderful milk from a farm. So we used to make yogurt out of it. So to prepare yogurt, I've done my fair share of yogurt making. I know the process. First of all, you heat the milk, but you don't heat it. You don't let it overboil. Just when you start seeing the bubbles forming, when it just reaches about boiling point, then you leave it to cool. And once it is reasonably cool, in fact, in the US, we used to have thermometers. We used to put it, those long thermometers with a bulb on top. You leave it in the thing and you see, okay,
40 degrees is the best.
Fahrenheit. So 110 degrees. Okay. Put the culture. They say. And when you mix the culture, you mix it a little bit and then you leave it. And then no going back constantly and stirring it. The next morning you'll see if the culture was good, nice thick yogurt. So the preparation of yogurt is like the transformation of an individual from knowledge to wisdom is like preparing yogurt. First of all, see, you've gained knowledge. You gain knowledge at the very beginning. No doubt. You gain knowledge at the very beginning. You gain information at the very beginning. But its conversion to wisdom is what is important. So first of all, you have to heat yourself to boiling point and then let yourself cool. What does that mean? Heat yourself to boiling point and let yourself cool. Means you have to go through the din and roar of the marketplace. You have to go through the challenges of life. You have to deal with situations. There's no any age to it, but for 99.99% of people, they have to follow a process of grihastha, as they say. Huh? The challenges of life are grihastha. Swami Chinmayananda, I think he asked a seeker, someone who came to his ashram when he was starting the Chinmay mission. He says, have you ever been in love? Have you been infatuated to a woman? Have you dealt with money? Have you managed money? Have you felt the joy of the, the taste of money? If you haven't done these things, you're not ready. Because out there, the person came, I want to take sannyas. Have you done these things? Have you tasted them? Because you have to see, you have to understand the psychology of the human mind. You have to understand what is desire. You have to understand the potency of it, to understand why it needs to be managed. Uh, Otherwise, it's all superficial information. So you have to let yourself get heated to boiling point. Deal with the mind and its desires. Deal with the challenges that life presents and the conflicts it presents. It's nothing but a conflict between your own mind and the world. So it's a circumstance. But you don't let it overboil. You don't let it overheat. Whenever things are getting too hot, go to the ashram. Cool yourself down. Take a break. But this process of cooling and heating, cooling, heating and cooling, heating and cooling, heating and cooling, and then adding a dose of yogurt, that culture you add is the knowledge. So that capacity to be with the knowledge, that capacity to take in knowledge and allow yourself to sit with it, to reflect upon it, to ponder upon it. Now you can't do it in the din and roar of the marketplace. You have to take some time. You have to find a good time. If not a good, if you can't spare days, well, find a good time of the day, like this time of the day, 8 o'clock in the morning. Nobody's in a rush. Huh? Markets are not open yet, so nobody's stressing. The moment it's 9:15, what'll happen? Class is extending today. Oh God, I have to pre-market says. Uh, you can't study in depth in the din and roar of the marketplace. You'll be too distracted. So you have to find a good time, a good place where you can allow yourself to stay with the knowledge. That's why we study in the morning. That's why we're having the class right now. And for deeper assimilation, perhaps you'll need a couple of days, weeks, months, years. I don't know. It's like that's allowing the yogurt, that's allowing the milk to sit overnight. When that sitting overnight happens, next morning, upon that, there's an incredible transformation. The liquid, flowy milk. The mind is like the flowing milk. It's not stable. That same liquid, flowing milk becomes, it doesn't become hard, it doesn't become brittle, it just becomes stable. Huh? Yogurt is not like stone. Yogurt is just stable. It's soft but stable. So that's what knowledge does to your mind. That's what wisdom does to your mind. It doesn't make you a stone. It doesn't make you lose your emotion. It just makes you gain some control of your flowiness. Soft but firm. It helps you retain the beauty of the mind, the, the joy of the mind, the fun of the mind, but at the same time makes it stable. So, one who has gained spiritual knowledge, who has churned it into wisdom, becomes stable like yogurt, as opposed to flowy like milk. But allowing that time is very important. If you're in a rush, if you want to become Christ overnight, sorry, at least Vedanta doesn't advocate it. It's not possible.
Religious practitioners have not been following the prescribed procedures for spiritual development. They merely run through volumes of spiritual literature, and they do so alongside their material and sensual indulgences. Give no time nor put in an effort to think, contemplate upon the matter therein. Consequently, they do not assimilate, absorb the knowledge taken in. All the accumulated knowledge becomes a burden rather than a blessing. No more useful to them than gold on a mule's back is to the mule.
So he says most people go through volumes and volumes of scriptural literature, information, but alongside the material and sensual indulgence. At no point do they regulate or control their material and sensual indulgence. In fact, they think of it as an impediment. How can you ask me to stop what I'm enjoying? I don't believe in stopping what I'm enjoying. So the idea of going to an ashram, it's it's more mental than physical. An ashram is a mental space, not necessarily a physical space, but it's a refuge which is away from your regular habits, which is away from your daily indulgences. It's a refuge for your mind, for the rehabilitation of your mind. So you can't, with the intake of spiritual knowledge, you are trying to perhaps address certain incorrect ways of being, for which you have to challenge yourself, for which you have to step out of the situation. You have to step out from the influences of your mind. So you have to go to an ashram. That's the idea. You almost have to disappear for some, but mentally, not, and this is not running away. This is not being escapist. The idea is not you run away from the problem, no, but even to gain the understanding and wisdom of how to deal with the problem, there's no harm in taking some time. In fact, it's important that you take some time. Otherwise, simply gaining information alongside your daily habits, it becomes a burden. You think that you know how to deal with the problem, but actually you don't. It's like gold on a mule's back.
Whereas, with proper intake of spiritual knowledge, you rise from a physical, sensual person to emotional, to intellectual, to spiritual. People the world over have been denied spiritual education. As a result, they are steeped in ignorance and preoccupied with accumulating material wealth and indulging in their senses, not realizing that wealth and senses can provide only a false sense of peace and pleasure. As a person acquires spiritual knowledge, he rises from the physical to the emotional level. He is no more victimized by material and sensual demands. His physical pleasures are shadowed by the joys of the mind. Thus, continuing to acquire more knowledge, he develops intellectual clarity and awareness, which provides him satisfaction and solace superior to the joys of the mind or the pleasures of the body. The culmination of knowledge reaches the seeker to the Supreme Self, the abode of absolute peace and bliss. The ultimate spiritual experience is like blazing sunlight before all other lights. The ignorance of self-knowledge makes the life of a person rough and rugged. The trial and tribulation of the world produce worry and anxiety. He remains in a state of stress, but as he chooses to gain more and more knowledge, he frees himself gradually from mundane persecution. Thus, pursuing the self, he reaches the state of enlightenment. The entire experience is like rising up in a balloon. On the ground, one feels the ruggedness of the surface. Rising even a little above the surface, the humps and bumps are gone. Gathering more height, even hills and valleys make no difference. And at the highest point, everything is smooth and graceful. So does the enlightened one feel absolute peace and bliss in the zenith of spirituality.
See, I don't know if you've experienced this. Next time you're on a plane, look down at the terrain down, like below you. Look outside the window and look at the terrain below you. Sometimes when you're crossing mountains, invariably the thought will come to you, oh, what will it be like to be up in that mountain? And you think, oh, it's not that difficult. It can't be that difficult to climb up out there. From the plane, it doesn't look that difficult. In fact, it doesn't seem that difficult because you're at a higher vantage point. When you're down there, you perhaps feel it's almost impossible. Even climbing a small hill is impossible, let alone a mountain. So he says growing spiritually is like rising up in a balloon or in a plane for that matter. On the ground, even the potholes bother you. Uh, On the ground, even walking the potholes will bother you. Then when you rise above, you realize those humps and bumps are not a problem, but okay, if you're at a certain height, you're looking at hills, and you're looking at rocks and valleys. I don't know if you've gone hot air ballooning. Next time you get an experience. It's a wonderful experience. I had the pleasure of going hot air ballooning. Incredible how you gain height and your perspective changes. So on the ground, everything is bothering you. Even the bumps and the small potholes are bothering you. Gain a little bit of height and you come to the level of the bumps and the hills and the um, small peaks, essentially. And when you go right on top, when you go extremely high, everything is microscopic. Everything is like inconsequential. Uh, so growing spiritually, not only do you gain freedom from the potholes, you gain freedom from the hills, you gain freedom from the peaks, the mountains. You have that capacity to manage all the oscillations, all the ruggedness of the world. But it happens in stages. First physical, actually first material. The first freedom you gain is from material attachment. See, all of it happens simultaneously. It's not that you can only, bifurcate it necessarily. Well, this bifurcation is for our understanding. You're dealing with your material attachment, you're dealing with your physical attachment, your emotional attachment, your intellectual, everything at the same time, no doubt. But your growth happens stage by stage. Your ability to your objectivity is attained stage by stage. The first objectivity you gain is to material, to money, to wealth, to possessions, to objects. If you're extremely attached to objects and wealth, then you know Dilli dur hai. But if there is a certain level of growth that has happened there, it's moving in the right direction. If you become more charitable by nature, if you become more tolerating by nature, if you're able to deal with a little bit of loss with objectivity, moving in the right direction. Then comes objectivity to the physical body. to small illnesses and small problems. Hmm. How much does an allergy bother you? A runny nose bother you? A slight headache bother you? 99 fever bother you? I know people who 99 fever, they want to be admitted to ER. I'm not advocating this, but one of my teachers used to say a fever begins at 102.
No, but as you just said about there's a thin line between taking care of material things and being attached to material things. So you ought to take care of the material things, and you ought to be vigilant about them. And if you lose that, so so obviously it is going to affect you. It should affect you. If my car is dent, if I'm driving and somebody dents my car, so it is going to affect me. Or if my wallet is pickpocketed, it is going to affect me. Or if I stain, I'm eating something and it stains my boss t-shirt, it is going to affect me. Probably it is not going to. It should not linger, but it is going to affect you at that time.
So what is the
Shouldn't
meaning?
it affect?
What's the meaning of affect? 6 months later, you're still thinking about.
No, and that's what I'm saying. At that moment, you feel bad about it, but
The capacity to see objectivity is the ability to rise above that feeling of affectation. Now, see, try to differentiate between your sense of responsibility and your sense of affectation. It's very important you make the distinction. At no point have we said that you shouldn't feel a sense of responsibility, and we'll keep saying that. Especially if something is harmed due to your negligence, absolutely you have responsibility. Hmm. But we're not talking about being indifferent to material objects. We're talking about how, to what extent does it affect you, bother you, destroy your own sense of mental peace. One thing is, how long does it linger? Linger, when we say it shouldn't linger, doesn't mean you forget about the solution. No. See, you have to make a distinction between the external responsibility you have towards it and the inner affectation you have about it. They're two different things. They're two different things. And in fact, if you are internally affected, your ability to deal with external responsibility diminishes.
how do you explain
Child
that
is unwell.
internal?
Your child is unwell. Your child is unwell. Your child is having a um, allergic reaction. Oh my god! Oh my god! What's happening? What's happening? A lot of people make a lot of noise. Nobody finds a solution. And in that noise, their ability to find someone who can actually help. You have to deal with the problem objectively. Half the time, people get into medical complications because they are unable to follow the advice of one single person, a doctor. They want to get second and third and fifth opinions, not stick with one. I'm not saying you have to blindly follow one. That patience and objectivity to see something through. People are so emotional in a problem. So that distinction between responsibility and affectation. Of course, you have a responsibility. Of course. You go to the ashram. You go to the ashram. Things are taken. 20-year-old things are taken beautifully care of. Sometimes you wonder, why are you dusting these things? Huh? You go to visit the ashram, they'll put you in a karma. Go and dust those things in the shelf out there. Why are you dusting those things? What? It's taken care of course. But tomorrow, if for whatever khuda na khasta, it is lost, how bothered will you be? We're not asking you to burn it down. We're not asking you to leave it. We're not asking you to get rid of it. We're asking you to entertain the thought, what will the loss of it do to you? Because invariably, by circumstance, may not be by your doing, by circumstance, you will lose. You will lose things that are dear to you, or you'll be in a position to lose them. Hmm? So we're not talking about the sense of responsibility. Never did I once mention that you have to become irresponsible or indifferent to it. Your ability to address a situation where you might lose it. That's what is, and what happens inside. घबराहट होती है, tension होती है. Are you able to tell yourself, you'll manage, you'll find a solution.
It's actually getting detached to the things and still taking care of them. That's it.
Absolutely. See, you're using the word still taking care of it because you're thinking detachment means separation. No, detachment means taking care of it.
Yeah. That's
You won't be using the word still. You remove the word still. Detachment
it.
means taking care of things.
Thank you.
Attachment means becoming obsessed with things. Just one second.
So I'm just asking you again. Yeah. So I'm just repeating my question. So what is the thin line which will help me to understand that whether I am
There's
obsessed
no
with
thin
it?
line. There's no thin line. That's what I'm telling you. They're two totally different things. Your sense of responsibility is totally different from your sense of affectation. It's not like you have to, थोड़ा ज्यादा कर लिया तो responsibility बन गया, थोड़ा कम कर लिया तो affectation. There's no thin line. You can feel extremely responsible towards something. You can feel responsible and be affected. Both are possible. That also happens in attachment.
So I am suffering from that problem only.
So don't have to don't have to worry about the responsibility. You have to address the affectation. At no point are we saying become irresponsible for your possessions. And therefore, we said that this addressing this affectation happens in stages: material, physical, emotional, intellectual, spiritual. At no point do you lose a sense of responsibility. Question is, how does affectation reduce? Affectation reduces with knowledge, with understanding the nature of things. There's no other way. Either by understanding or by accepting. Either we will delve deeper into what is being discussed and understand the truth that is trying to be conveyed, or life will forcefully teach us by snatching away from us. But when life teaches us, it's like, when something is snatched away from you, it pains, it hurts. We're just trying to save ourselves from that pain. What's the point of being unaffected after being affected? We're trying to get rid of the affectation altogether. Problem is, a lot of us don't learn despite life's experiences. So there's a saying: the wise learn from the knowledge of others, experience of others. The wise learn from the experience of others, fools from their own. So we're trying to learn from the experience of others. We're trying to learn from the experience of people around us, from the experience of these sages who have shared this knowledge with us. We're trying to learn from it. Fools learn from their own. Bigots don't learn from any. Bigots don't learn. So better to be a fool than a bigot. Here you can proudly say, I am a fool. At least I'm not a bigot. But the aspiration should be to become wise. You have to become, gain that Sakshi Bhav. Separate yourself from things, beings, situations mentally and understand the nature of things. There's no other way. Okay.
Those who remain in ignorance complain of iniquity and injustice prevailing in the world, that wickedness is rampant everywhere. The innocent are being deceived and harassed by the vicious. People wonder why the dishonest prosper while the honest suffer. This has been the general grievance everywhere. Few have attempted to analyze and investigate the cause for it. The layperson meekly resigns it to fate, without realizing that there is a reason for this paradox in life. The good suffering at the hands of the bad. A careful scrutiny will show that it arises from the distinctions in the nature of their inner personalities. The ones with a weaker constitution suffer. The solution lies in fortifying the weak. One needs to study the inner constitution, reflect over it, and strengthen the intellect. Having developed a strong intellect, one becomes equipped to deal with the treacherous practices in the world.
So one who remains in ignorance, one who doesn't gain wisdom, one who doesn't gain the strength of the buddhi, one who doesn't develop the buddhi, is naturally going to be a victim of the world. No matter how nice you are, no matter how many good thoughts you have, no matter how positive you are as an individual, if you don't develop your buddhi and if you don't gain the wisdom of life, you are going to be a victim to it. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason for this paradox in life. Even the good suffer. In fact, mostly the good suffer. You must be thinking, people who pay back their loans, they are the good. The big fish, they take their loans and they don't pay it back. Better to be that kind of person, no? Better to be vicious. There's a reason for the good suffering at the hands of the bad. And that is going to be covered in the next topic. The next topic, what he's going to talk about, is this concept of the aggressive and the passive. Very interesting. A slight change in course from what we've been discussing. Now, having discussed the problems with gaining wisdom, he's only trying to highlight that it's important you gain wisdom for your own well-being, for your own growth, and for your own ability to manage life in its situation. So the idea is to become aggressive and not remain passive. Goodness or badness, of course, we should be good and not bad. So what is aggressive, what is passive, what is good, what is bad, we'll discuss in the next class. I don't want to start a new topic today, but we'll see you again on Wednesday. And with that, with this, we'll start with this thought process. We'll start with this topic. So I'm happy to conclude class. Happy New Year. I'm glad we could have a class first thing in the morning, first day of the year. Thank you for joining in. I do have a little bit of a hard stop, so we'll take up any questions at the beginning of the next class. Okay, great. Thank you so much for joining. Hari Om.
Thank you,
A very
sir.
happy
Thank
New Year
you so
2024 to all of you.
much.
Thank you.